Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Pat Courtney Strong, and I provide marketing support to the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, which is an independent contractor to the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority's Clean Energy Communities program for the Eastern New York Upstate Territory. I'm here today with Planning Commission's Sustainability Director Todd Fabozzi and the other presenters to provide an overview of community choice aggregation and also briefly of the Clean Energy Communities program to help municipal leaders learn how to access the program. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to go over with you so you'll enjoy the webinar fully. We keep attendees on mute, but you can communicate with us through the chat feature of WebEx. If you're signed in through your computer, there is a toolbar that becomes visible at the top center of your screen when you put your cursor there. On the toolbar, you'll see the chat icon to the right. You can communicate with us privately or publicly through it by using the drop-down menu for either. This is how you should also submit questions for the speakers to us, which we'll take at the end. If you're connected via your telephone only, you could email questions to the presenters to me at pat@courtneystrong.com. We'll do our best to get in as many questions as possible. As I'm sure you know, things can happen in a webinar, so if you get disconnected for any reason, just log back in. If you notice audio or visual issues on our end, feel free to use the chat box or email me to let us know what you're experiencing. To answer the most frequent question we usually receive about our webinars, yes, we will send you the slides and the bios of all the speakers in a follow-up email after today's webinars. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Todd Fabozzi of CDRPC, but first a little bit about Todd. He has been a professional urban planner since 1993 and has worked for the Capital District Regional Planning Commission since 1996. He has developed the Commission's Geographic Information System, has lectured extensively on regional growth, and has been involved in numerous smart growth, sustainability, and watershed protection studies and programs. Todd directs the NYSERDA Clean Energy Communities program for the Eastern Upstate Territory. He has a master's in urban and regional planning. Hey, Todd, great to see you.
Okay, thank you. Greetings and thank you for joining this webinar on the topic of community choice aggregation. As Pat noted, I am Todd Fabozzi, the Director of Sustainability for the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. CDRPC is a recipient of a Clean Energy Communities Program grant from NYSERDA, which covers the Eastern Upstate New York Territory. Today's webinar is being funded through this grant. CEC program grants are also being administered by the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board for the Western Upstate Territory and by Solar One for New York City and Long Island. A team of regional organizations and private companies has been assembled as subcontractors to help deliver the program throughout the state. The CEC program provides free technical support to communities to become energy efficient and to transition to renewable energy sources. As part of the CEC program, there are 10 high-impact actions that communities can undertake, and if they achieve 4 out of the 10, then they become a designated clean energy community, which qualifies them to receive match-free grants. While community choice aggregation is an option for communities regardless of whether they participate in the CEC program, it is one of the program's 10 high-impact actions. Communities that implement CCA programs have the potential to save money and to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Today's webinar, which is being produced by one of our program partners, Courtney Strong Incorporated, will be comprised of 3 parts. First, an introductory primer on community choice aggregation in New York State by Brad Tito, Program Manager of Communities and Local Government at NYSERDA, and Ted Kelly from the New York State Department of Public Services. Then we will have a panel discussion about the Sustainable Westchester CCA, which is the first operational CCA in New York State. Included on the panel are Nina Orville from Abundant Efficiency, Dan Welsh from Sustainable Westchester, and Sam Morgan from Constellation Energy. Brad Tito will moderate this session. Lastly, we have a panel of CCA administrators, which includes Javier Barrios from Good Energy, Louise Gava from Mega, and Glenn Weinberg from Joule Community Power Joule Assets. This panel will also be moderated by Brad. Now I'll turn it over to Pat for a quick review of the acronyms that may be used in this discussion and then to introduce the first program.
Thank you, Todd. Now, if this looks a little formidable, don't worry. We are sending you this slide, but just to give you a little bit of background, inevitably we toss around acronyms, so here they are, and you'll get them with your email. All right. So I would like to now introduce Brad Tito, who's going to be guiding us through this event today. Brad is the program manager for communities and local government at NYSERDA. He works with communities across New York State to help them save energy and improve the environment. His role is to package and promote innovative and responsive clean energy offerings that resonate with local governments and the nearly 20 million people they serve. The communities and local government team works to institutionalize deployment of clean energy solutions that incorporate tools and services from state agencies and authorities while presenting a unified approach to municipal and community leaders and build on local expertise to work through the trusted champions to deploy solutions. Prior to joining NYSERDA, Brad served as Director of Sustainability for the City of Yonkers, New York's fourth largest city, where he works with the departments of city government and community stakeholders to save more than $2 million in annual energy costs. He led a number of high-profile initiatives, including an award-winning LED streetlight replacement project, the establishment of mandatory green building standards, and the replacement of over 500 windows in historic Yonkers City Hall. He'll be joined by Ted Kelly. We're so happy to have Ted with us. He's an assistant counsel in the Office of General Counsel at the New York State Department of Public Service. He is lead counsel and serves a legal and policy role on matters including the community choice aggregation and community distributed generation programs, the Reforming the Energy Vision Initiative, the oversight of distributed energy resources, net metering, and the value of distributed energy resource proceeding, and oversight of NYSERDA programs, including the Clean Energy Fund and the New York Green Bank. He's a graduate of Wesleyan and New York University School of Law. Brad?
Great. Thank you, Pat and Todd. I appreciate it. Good morning. Again, my name is Brad Tito. I'm Program Manager for Communities and Local Government at NYSERDA. Thank you very much for joining today. Before we get started, let me say that CCA is a journey that we all take together. So please know that NYSERDA Clean Energy Community Coordinators are available statewide to provide assistance to local governments on clean energy actions, including CCA. You can search NYSERDA Clean Energy Communities for more information. Here's, on the previous slide, there's some contact information. I'll provide it again later, but please don't hesitate to contact me directly if you have any questions or you'd like to explore CCA further. And again, we have a few things we want to accomplish during today's webcast. One, we'll go over the fundamentals of CCA. So what is CCA? How does it work? What benefits can it potentially deliver for your community? We'll get an inside look at the Westchester Power CCA, the first CCA in New York State. And finally, we're going to speak with the CCA administrators, Good Energy, Mega, and Joule. And obviously, we'll follow with questions and open discussion. So slide. So what is CCA? CCA allows local elected officials to choose where the energy comes from for their community. It's a program to purchase power in bulk for virtually all homes and small businesses in your community, and it applies to cities, towns, and villages. So with CCA, local governments join together, so it's not just one, it can be many. They join together into a bulk purchasing arrangement and competitively procure energy supplies with the help of a CCA administrator. And the purpose is to build market clout and negotiate better prices and better terms on energy supply and other clean energy products and services. So with CCAs, all eligible customers are automatically enrolled in the program. It's an opt-out program. This is the defining characteristic of CCA. customers are automatically enrolled and they can choose to opt out. Now, the municipality will enter into an energy supply contract with an energy services company, or ESCO, on behalf of CCA customers. And these customers are automatically switched to this ESCO, who is then listed as the supplier on their utility bill. And with CCA, the utility remains responsible for delivering electricity. You pay the same electric bill you paid previously. If you have a power outage, you call the utility just like you would if there was no CCA at all. So who exactly can participate? Anyone within your jurisdiction can join the CCA. So anyone can join, but not everyone is automatically enrolled. Remember, this is an opt-out program. Residential and small commercial customers get automatically enrolled. However, customers who are already with an ESCO, or if they have a block on their account for any reason, or if they're a large commercial or industrial customer, they must opt in to participate. They're not automatically enrolled. And then participants in low-income utility assistance programs, they may be enrolled in CCA, but only if special requirements for ESCO service for these customers are available at the time of enrollment. And CCAs are not required to include these participants. And as far as the level of effort on the part of the municipality, you would pass a local law to authorize CCA. Later, you will enter into an energy supply contract. And all of this is done in conjunction with community outreach and education. And you can get pretty far along in this process and still not be committed to move forward. So, for example, you could pass the local law, you can select a CCA administrator, you can even participate in a solicitation for energy supply and not be committed to move forward. But for most communities, CCA energy prices will be among the most important considerations in determining whether or not to move forward. And before the solicitation for energy supply is even issued, you agree in advance to what is an acceptable energy supply price for your community. So how do you know what is an acceptable price? Well, you'll typically establish a benchmark. You'll look backward into the past 12 months, 24 months, or 36 months at what residents paid for utility supply historically. And you look for the bid price to be less than this benchmark. And if it is less and all other requirements are met, it's at that point that you move forward with CCA. So assuming the price is right, when the contract is signed, you are typically locking into a fixed rate energy price for the term of the contract, which may be 2 or 3 years. And it's important to note that your constituents are paying a fixed rate, but the utility rate is variable from month to month. So some months you may be saving money, other months you may be paying more than the prevailing utility price. And administrators try to make an accurate forecast, but no one can predict the future price of energy. So there is risk. But there are 3 important ways in which this risk is mitigated. First, CCA administrators should all offer consumer-friendly terms that allow participants to opt out with no fee or penalty and return to the utility supply at any time. Second, there happens to be an exemption from state sales tax for ESCO customers, which also applies to CCA. And this sales tax exemption may account for a significant portion of the customer's overall savings when comparing CCA to what the customer would have spent if they had stayed with the utility. And this tax savings is not subject to the same market risk. And third, and this may be the most important, the potential for saving money from the supply contract or from the sales tax exemption, this is just a starting point. CCA offers an opportunity for communities to capture the economic benefits of clean energy more broadly by offering community solar, electric vehicles, smart thermostats, and other clean energy initiatives. Participants can gain access to giveaways, discounts, and bill credits, and these not only save money, they create jobs and drive economic development right here in our local communities. So let's talk for a minute about how clean energy fits into CCA. And to help us understand these opportunities, Ted Kelly from the New York State Department of Public Service has joined us. Ted, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Great. So, Ted, I'd like to ask you about renewable energy, but before I do that, would you mind, again, introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about your portfolio and responsibilities?
Sure. So, again, I'm at the Department of Public Service, which is the staff arm of the Public Service Commission, the five-member, currently four-member commission that regulates utilities, energy, and so on in New York State. And I mostly work on our sort of new and clean energy programs. So that includes kind of overarching reforming the Energy Vision Initiative, includes the programs NYSERDA runs to support and fund clean energy technologies, and includes things like community distributed generation and CCA. And I've been working on CCA since the start of it in New York with Sustainable Westchester. So in terms of renewable energy as a component of a CCA, but the main way that that gets looked at is through the energy supplier, the energy supply company, providing a renewable product. There are kind of different types and different standards for renewable products. The current standard that we've moved to at the department and the commission is a requirement that the project owner, the energy company, either buy energy directly or buy renewable energy certificates, which represent the renewable aspect of the energy, from a renewable generator that either is in New York State or supplies energy into New York State, generally from a neighboring state. And that, that can range from a wind farm, a large-scale solar installation, to a hydroelectric generator, which some of the ones we have in New York are 100 years old or more. So any of those can provide renewable power either through a full sale of the power plus REC or through a sale of just the REC to the energy supplier, who then will provide that power to the municipality. And generally, there'd be a premium for that compared to sort of the average price if they're not for a non-renewable product. At least in the CCAs we have so far, generally it's the choice of each individual customer whether to get the renewable product at the premium or whether to get a default product.
Right. So these renewable energy certificates, RECs, these are proof that the CCA's energy comes from renewable sources, and that they will meet. They'll help meet the goal of achieving 50% of the state's electricity from renewable sources by 2030. Is that correct?
Right, and it's how we make sure that multiple people don't claim the credit for the same kilowatt of renewable power. So each time you have energy generated by a renewable resource, it creates one REC, and one person can own that REC and claim credit for it.
Okay, so what I heard was that we're talking about renewable energy generators like wind farms, hydroelectric plants, solar projects, and for the most part, these facilities have to be located right here in New York, or they get imported. Is that right?
That's right.
All right, and then Ted, even if you're buying just the power from a renewable energy generator, so as a legal matter, if you want to claim that you're using renewable energy, you need to buy the REC also. Is that right?
Yeah, that's generally right. There's some very detailed guidance from, I believe, the FTC about exactly what you can claim if you're buying the power but not the REC. But in general, if you want to tell people that they're buying renewable energy, you need to have the REC.
Great. All right. Thanks, Ted. So again, for most communities, cost is among the most important considerations in determining whether or not to purchase renewable energy. What I can tell you is that the Westchester Power CCA, which we'll hear from in a few minutes, consumed more than 1 billion kilowatt hours of renewable energy over their first 25 months of operation, and at the same time have saved customers some $13 million compared to what they would have paid for utility supply. So while RECs aren't a requirement of CCA, there is evidence that we can potentially do both. Also, it's important to note that the Westchester communities that chose 100% renewable energy as their default supply, the rate of customer attrition was lower in those communities than those that chose non-green power. And this suggests that residents may be happier and more satisfied with CCA when it aligns with their values. If you can save money and go renewable at the same time, that's really a great story to tell. So you can choose to have energy come from renewable sources. But it doesn't stop there. If your focus is really on saving as much money as possible, there are some exciting opportunities you'll want to consider. So slide. Now, community solar allows members of a community the opportunity to share the benefits of solar power, even if they cannot or prefer not to install solar panels on their property. And when a customer signs up for community solar, they benefit from a direct reduction in their energy expenditures. This is a direct cost savings to customers, and these savings can be guaranteed. Now, this picture is actually not a community solar project, but it could be. I mean, this is what they look like. This is a 2 to 3 megawatt project on a Madison County landfill site. This is just an extremely cost-effective way to deliver solar power. And I was talking to a colleague at NYSERDA, and just to put this into perspective, he estimates that subscribers to a project like this could collectively save, more than $50,000 annually. Solar developers, they're not that excited to spend a lot of time and money acquiring customers for this kind of project. And if a CCA can help lower their customer acquisition cost by offering subscriptions to CCA participants, the developer would likely be willing to offer a lower price. And it's just a great example of how CCA and clean energy are a good fit. And in the future, it may be possible for CCA customers to be automatically enrolled into into community solar and other community distributed generation projects. This has amazing potential, but it requires approval from the Department of Public Service. And maybe I could ask Ted to tell us about these community distributed generation implementation plans. Ted, is it fair to say that we now have a framework for how community renewables and CCA can work together?
Yes, I think that's true. We have a framework for it that's kind of in the process of being finalized and getting towards implementation. And I think one important feature of this is that while it does allow customers to be enrolled in an opt-out basis, it does still require that they be separately billed for the community distributed generation. So what will happen is they'll get a credit on their bill, they'll get a credit on their utility bill, and then they'd have to be sent a separate bill from the community solar provider or by the CCA, the community solar credit, which would be less than the credit. So overall, they would save money, but it would require them to pay an additional bill. And because of that, and because we recognize that this may be confusing for some customers, it was an important feature to us that if somebody doesn't want to be a member, either first of all, they'd be offered the opportunity to just opt out completely. But second of all, if they don't pay in the first month or when initially enrolled, they'd just be removed from the program, but without being kind of rebilled or subject to collections. That essentially be forgiven. We are working at the department on getting a consolidated billing program in place, and once that's in place, CDG, Community Solar, will be able to be billed through the same bill as the utility bill, which will potentially make things a lot simpler, but that is still a little ways off in the future, probably still more than a year in the future before it's actually a live option implemented by the utilities.
Great. Thanks, Ted. So beyond community solar, there are a range of clean energy initiatives that we think have great potential in the context of CCA. So just the category of bulk purchasing, whether it's electric vehicles, home energy retrofits, light bulbs, other products and services. I mean, companies want to gain access to thousands of CCA customers, and as part of a strategic partnership, they may be willing to offer generous discounts and giveaways. The other category, peak shaving. If a CCA is able to reduce peak demand by, for example, everyone turning up their thermostat by a degree or two, This can have significant value to the grid, and CCA customers could benefit directly from participating in these demand response programs. And in the future, we can see emerging technologies like energy storage or vehicle-to-grid technology delivering additional layers of value. Ultimately, CCA can be the place to go for everything related to local clean energy. And this kind of portfolio approach will ensure CCA is robust and sustainable well into the future. Slide. So if your community were to pass a local law to enable CCA, you would be joining a growing list. There are now more than 70 communities throughout New York State that have authorized CCA by adopting a local law. And it's fair to expect that a lot more communities will join CCA in the next few years. And the big picture here is that CCA is happening. Communities can be part of it. Slide. So that's why we're so excited to have the team from Sustainable Westchester here to talk about the Westchester Power CCA. I'm going to pass it back to Pat at this point to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Brad. Well, we're delighted to have Dan Welsh with us. He's the Program Director of Westchester Power, the first community choice aggregation available in New York State. He's been a core team member with Sustainable Westchester and its predecessor organization, the Northern Westchester Energy Action Consortium, since 2009. He was a part of the original team that created the Energize New York initiative, served as vice chairman of the NWEAC Executive Committee, and later on the Sustainable Westchester Formation Steering Committee. We'll also hear from Sam Morgan of Constellation Energy. He has 19 years of experience working in the deregulated energy industry, beginning at World Energy Solutions, followed by 11 years with Con Edison Solutions. And he has managed the New England region for Con Edison Solutions with his team and grew that region's book of business to approximately 5 terawatt hours of annual load. Sam has worked with municipal opt-out aggregations for 13 years and currently leads Constellation's government aggregation team responsible for serving opt-out aggregations across Constellation's competitive markets. Sam is a graduate of the University of Richmond at Virginia, lives in the Boston area. We will also hear from Nina Orville, president of Abundant Efficiency, a consulting firm that creates and implements innovative solutions to environmental and business challenges for local governments, corporations, and nonprofits. The firm specializes in multi-party public-private initiatives that generate environmental and economic development benefits. Abundant Efficiency served as program manager for Solarize Westchester, a NYSERDA-funded county-wide initiative fueling growth in the solar market through market aggregation strategies. The founding executive director of the Southern Westchester Energy Action Consortium, Nina also helped lead the formation of Sustainable Westchester, a successor organization. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be with you today. So I'm just going to give a very brief background to Sustainable Westchester and then pass the conversation back to my colleague Dan Welsh. Sustainable Westchester is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that includes almost all of Westchester's municipalities, including the county government itself as members. The 43 municipal members include a population of about 1 million residents. And as you've already heard, the Sustainable Westchester's predecessor organizations representing municipalities in the north and in the south of the county were created close to 10 years ago. And Dan Welsh and Brad Tito, as Sustainability Director for the City of Yonkers, and I were all involved in the management of the predecessors and in the formation of Sustainable Westchester. The organization works to accelerate progress on sustainability across Westchester County in a number of ways, including disseminating and promoting best practices, often through peer-to-peer learning, attracting resources, both financial and in the form of expertise not available to individual municipalities, and leveraging the market power of our members and their residents. And you'll hear from Dan how the organization brought these strategies to bear through Westchester Power, its CCA program. And then a little bit later in the discussion, we'll talk about the other clean energy programs that Sustainable Westchester offers. So back to you, Brad.
Thanks, Nina. So, Dan, maybe I'll just throw it out there. What is it about CCA that you thought was a good fit for Sustainable Westchester's mission?
Great, thanks, Brad, and thanks for your great CCA introduction. Covered a lot of great stuff there that'll be of high value to folks. The question of good fit, I mean, on its face, it's kind of obvious in a way. Sustainable Westchester, our main focus has always been in the creation of new opportunities to exploit initiatives with both environmental benefits and positive economic impacts. So just as say on its face, it was a great fit. Our member municipalities were comfortable with this type of venture, or at least collaborating across municipal lines to try and achieve things in an efficient shared service sort of way. So we drew on that history really at the very earliest, back at the formation of Sustainable Westchester. I can remember working on the earliest initiatives and referring to, for example, the collaborations on stormwater and other things that the towns had done in a voluntary way. So I think it was important that by the time we came to be presented with the opportunity for CCA, that there was that comfort level. And I think maybe relative to this question, for me, maybe the takeaway or worthy of compare and contrast is that existence of Sustainable Westchester as part of the backdrop there, and how it helped us to be comfortable with the idea, because it's a big jump for a municipal government, I think, to be contemplating these things. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to have that in place, perhaps, but maybe you can look at this as an opportunity to move in that direction and get more strength out of those collaborations. Another way that it was a good fit is in as much as the most effective things that we've done have always involved working with our municipalities, working with the committees of those municipalities and the nonprofits that support this kind of work. They've been really key players, and CCA really demands some engagement at that level. I mean, it's even part of the regulatory orders, right, to get out there and do your outreach. And you really need those local connections and local partnerships to help with that. So we've been blessed with great collaborations at that level, whether it be Bedford 2020 up in the north of the county, or working with Yonkers, your municipality, where you have a lot of in-house resources and know-how that we could use as best practices. So it's that element of collaboration with the municipalities that I think is needed under CCA and made this a good fit. So it really was a perfect fit for us. And if I look back, I can't recall anybody pushing back on it and saying, you know what, this is not for us, let's give it a pass. So.
Yeah, that's great. It is very much, I mentioned at the beginning, CCA is a journey we all take together, and I mean, I think that Sustainable Westchester is a case in point. I mean, the amount of meetings, Dan, that you must have attended, going and talking to boards and explaining what is CCA, how does it work, and what the potential benefits are. I mean, could you give us a little sense as to how much
but
you went in?
let's be clear here, though. At the time of the launch, I was not part of the core CCA team. I was part of the Sustainable Westchester startup team and the predecessor organizations. But we really have to thank a lot of other folks, and in particular, I should say that we were blessed with expertise on our board in the form of Mike Gordon, without which we probably wouldn't have got off the starting line. And Mike and our first executive director, Leo, and Glenn, who's on this call, they did the meetings. Actually, as also another hat as a municipal official, I was on the other side of some of those meetings as well. But there were probably, we could say, hundreds of such meetings, and a tremendous amount of dialogue with folks at different levels of the municipalities.
Yeah, I've had a chance to look at videos online where you're presenting in front of a town board and, giving the whole kind of presentation. And it's very informative, just to kind of familiarize yourself with it from the standpoint of, an actual town board meeting, the kinds of questions that are asked and answered. So it's very much involved in, engagement with the municipalities is just so critically important. So what can you tell us about the results, or the kind of the scale of the activity? What are the results in terms of economic and environmental benefits from Sustainable Westchester?
Sure. So if you'll flip to the next slide, this is just a simple overview. You referred to the sort of aggregate results, and they're impressive in terms of the total number. Of course, we're a fairly large county, so you really, in order to get some perspective, here's the sort of unit account results, and those are less impressive. These are not huge numbers, and I always like to say, basically the savings are kind of the entry ticket to this whole CCA business. Without at least good economics, it's hard to have the rest of the dialogue. And on the other hand, none of us would be here if it weren't for the central mission, which is moving to a renewable energy economy. If this program was presented in the beginning as just saving a few dollars and that's that, nobody would have got excited about it. But that said, the dollars are there. They're not huge. On an aggregate level relative to an individual town, though, it's still kind of interesting. A typical town might be able to claim, say, a couple $100,000 of this total savings. And I like to point out to the town officials there that if you're trying to find that kind of money in a municipal budget, say, as savings, it can be a big challenge. So even though it's not going to the general revenue of the town, you can think of it as saving that for your residents, and that's still a nice accomplishment to find those kind of dollars. But it is, as I say, for most of us, it's kind of the entry fee for all the other wonderful things that we can do with this platform. You'll see from these numbers, you can see that the customers in the green program, yes, they're paying a little more, but it's a small amount. It's maybe $2 a month in the Con Ed territory for an average account, and we always like to be cognizant that $2 can be important to some of our residents. We know that we don't want to make light of that. But on the whole, it's not a tremendous amount for the average household to help move us so far along on our clean energy goals. So we really think it's an attractive thing, and that's, I guess, borne out by the fact that most of our municipalities have opted for the green energy as a default. One other thing I ought to point out here, and what I omitted really, I should have put in a breakout of the commercial versus the residential. And the commercial accounts, these are small commercial accounts, the so-called, in our rate class, SC2s, and these are like small mom and pop shops or commercial enterprises that have usages that are in the same ballpark as the residential. They're non-demand accounts. They amount to about 7% of the total accounts that we have. So it's not a huge percentage. They basically broke even during this contract period. So again, not real exciting, but we still like to point out that these folks did that while contributing to again, moving the needle on the renewable energy supply, getting Westchester to not only 50 by 30 but rather 100 by now, and they enjoyed the rate stability that comes with with being in this low fixed rate program. They've been shielded from some of the wild west of the ESCO world. I've been in meetings where I've heard small business people talk about. In fact, early on there was a concern about CCA because people were associating it with their experience with the ESCOs. So I heard stories from some of these commercial accounts where they signed up for a special low rate and then found their bills went from $600 to $1,500 a month, and very soon thereafterwards. So they're shielded from that type of activity, and they become a part of this community program, which is a great thing. And a lot of these small businesses like to find opportunities to create those community connections. So overall, the economic benefits are there, and I think that's, as I say, it's a launch pad for us to do more of the great work.
Right. So, I mean, I look at this information, I see that that even when you're on green energy, you can save money. All right, so that's an important point. People think that, okay, if I'm going to do renewable energy, I'm going to pay more, but here we're going to save money, just not as much as if we had sort of a brown power, but that the difference between brown and green is maybe $1 or $2 a month. The other takeaway I see in these numbers is this kind of $13 million injection into the local economy over the 25-month period. It seems to me like, while it might not seem like a lot for an individual household, overall we probably will take what we can get. If you could put $13 million back into the pocketbook of ratepayers within Westchester, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and then what about the environmental benefits?
If you'll flip to the next slide. On this count, the marker that most people have been using is CO2, and I have to say these kinds of numbers tend to lose meaning to folks, but it is a large amount of CO2 mitigated. We've based that actually on the figures for the New York grid that you helped us put together, Brad. And so I think again, this is part of the central goals of the venture. And so when we go around and give our presentations to the town boards, they are paying attention to this number. There is a feeling of success that comes with having this environmental benefit, and it's really paying off in sort of feedback back to the support of the venture, and it feedback back into the other programs as well, which you'll hear more about.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that on these environmental benefits, 330,000 tons is an abstract number, and it's hard to get your head around. But what I will say is that there's a lot of interest in LED streetlight replacements, buying electric vehicles. You know, towns and villages and cities are doing all kinds of things to improve the environment. But there's probably nothing that has a more direct and significant environmental benefit than the CCA when you start integrating the renewable energy. I wish I could put this into perspective. I think it's fair to say this is the equivalent of taking tens of thousands of cars off the road completely. This is, I don't want to understate, you know, this is really significant and not easy to achieve. And in fact, if there was a silver bullet for our most significant environmental challenges, this is probably as close as you can find in terms of what can be accomplished. That's great.
Yeah, this is a huge piece of our energy lives, and I think people are getting more and more, they're recognizing that more and more. And as they at the municipal level, we have 24 towns are signed up at this point, but we have active discussions with the rest of the municipalities in Westchester who may have not quite made the gotten on the bus in the first round, but there's a strong interest, I think, and success is building on success.
Well, that's great to hear. It sounds like people are seeing it's working and they want to be a part of it. So I think when we look at the rest of the state, more than 70 communities having adopted legislation to authorize CCA, you know, they're looking at what has been achieved here in Sustainable Westchester and saying, yeah, I want those benefits for my community too. So what about some of the challenges you faced in getting to be an operating CCA? I'm sure some of our listeners would be interested.
Yeah, well, if you flip to the next slide, just to remind myself here, I guess the first thing that came to mind with this question was the fact that the folks who are now working on this don't have a lot of the challenges that we had. So now you have a relatively complete framework which outlines how CCA is supposed to proceed and what the requirements are. You have the regulatory framework and all the various dialogue that's associated with that helps people understand just how this has to go forward. You have the set of template documentation that NYSERDA has put together and provides most of what you need in terms of outlining your program. You have the example of Westchester Power now, and you know, our experience. We're happy to share that and talk to people and help them in any way that we can. And so that's out there. We didn't have that when we started. And you now have firms, and some of them are on this call, with rich experience in these areas and deep knowledge of the CCA and the energy environment in New York State that can help you to administer these programs. So none of that was available when we started. We had to put this together from scratch, and again, I don't take credit for that, but I was close to it and interfacing with it in various ways. It started out as actually as a legislative initiative, and at that time it was a matter of scrambling around trying to convince our state senator and assemblyman up in the north that this was a program they wanted to get behind, that it offered a great opportunity for the residents of the county, and it was nice because it was actually a bipartisan mix that took it up to the legislature and actually got the legislation passed. It went over to the governor's desk, and then they decided it should be passed over to the PSC, And so there's a long dialogue with the PSC and tons of documentation generation. And as Ted said, he was a part of it on the other side there. But basically, building this program from scratch was the first big challenge. And other than that, I would say that if you flip to the next slide, we had the same challenges that, in some sense, that any startup is going to face. Once the reality of approvals and contracts comes to be, now you've got to deliver, and you need things as simple as an office space. You've got to get funded, and so we had no money. They managed to convince Con Ed Solutions that we were a good credit risk, I guess, and they extended a few dollars to bridge us into operation. So showing that can happen, that it is at least as attractive and reliable looking an opportunity as that. We had to deal with basically still the sense that this is a new program, and municipal leaders who, although should be absolutely be credited for courage in stepping forward and being the first to do this, we're still nervous. It's a new thing. So when those first calls come in, and they do come in, and even if it's those of us who have some experience in local government, if you get 5 calls, it feels like a revolution sometimes. So when they come in, then naturally the municipal leadership is sort of, hey, what's this about? And you need to you have a whole communications challenge there, and just continuing to make sure that people are seeing the big picture, and that we're doing our customer service well, and able to get past those initial calls. There are always going to be some hiccups, and we had ours. I just cite the example of North Pelham, a municipality which actually doesn't exist, but in the Con Ed system, it still existed. So part of the Pelham accounts that should have come over did not come over because there was some ancient coding in the utility systems, and so we had to scramble around and fix that. But all these hiccups, they get fixed, and I think people really were able to keep their eye on the big opportunities. And as of today, as I say, I think that for most of the new ventures coming on, we know what a lot of those are, and we see that it can be done. So I think you should know that it's not the challenges are manageable.
Well, thanks for giving us a little peek under the hood. It's you can only imagine that it would be you'd face some challenges in doing something for the first time in New York State, working with all these local governments. But all things considered, it's a great outcome. The one thing I'll mention is you talked about template documents from NYSERDA. We've put together a toolkit of resources for communities that are interested in taking the next step with CCA. So you see a copy of a template legislation, some different template agreements you might sign, also a copy of the original order that established CCA. So all that information was actually modeled on what was used in Sustainable Westchester, but it's been kind of adapted so it's kind of easier plug and play, if you will, for municipalities. If you just search NYSERDA CCA Toolkit, you should get right in there and see what resources are available.
Yeah, it's a great resource, and we still refer to these things and also the orders and all this documentation that's out there regularly ourselves.
Great. So beyond the supply contract, I mean, what other kinds of complementary programs are you engaged with, and why are they important? And maybe this is for Nina, I'm not sure, but
yeah, Nina is very deeply involved in all of the fun stuff actually that's going on here at Sustainable Westchester. So let her take that.
Great. I'm happy to take that, and if you could advance to the next slide, please. So Sustainable Westchester has worked to create an increasingly integrated ecosystem of clean energy opportunities for its municipalities and businesses and residents. And all these programs that I'm going to mention are opt-in programs, unlike CCA, but ultimately we seek to integrate them and to leverage the CCA platform to promote swifter adoption. And so some of the leading programs offered by Sustainable Westchester include the Solarize Westchester program, which launched in 2015. We've done campaigns with 22 municipalities, and those have resulted in close to 600 installations, both residential and commercial, totaling about 6 megawatts of capacity. We also, as part of our original Solarize work, did outreach to all of the municipalities in the county, encouraging them to adopt streamlined solar permitting processes. And the result of that was, I think, about 17 municipalities did so. So we were working on a couple of different levels with Solarize. Another program that we just launched this year is Community Solar, which you've been talking about, Brad. And in this case also, we're working on a couple of different tracks, working with municipalities and developers to bring more solar capacity to the county. And we're also signing up subscribers for developers. And this is something that we would like to integrate with tightly with CCA in the future. But currently, it's an opt-in program that leverages the list of thousands of people who have expressed interest in Solarize, but who were unable to move forward in installing solar on their own properties. And then we're also doing outreach activities in communities throughout the county to ensure that we're reaching beyond the homeowner market to present this opportunity to renters and others who may not have raised their hand during the Solarize campaigns. And ultimately, we see community solar as a way to bring the benefits of solar energy to nearly everybody in the county. And next slide. Other programs that are offered by Sustainable Westchester include Clean Transportation, which offers aggregation discounts for EVs to municipalities, Westchester employers, and residents. And this has resulted in some significant additional discounts for some vehicles. Also, through this program, we're assessing and enhancing the charging infrastructure throughout the county, and in very early stages of beginning to evaluate opportunities for EV ride sharing. And Ron Kamen of Earthkind Energy is managing this program for Sustainable Westchester. We're also really excited. We're in the process of launching the Heat Smart Westchester program to bring renewable heating and cooling with energy efficiency to homeowners and other property owners in Westchester County. And this is a program that will be modeled on Solarize, and it's offered in partnership with a number of local partners, including Energize New York. And we're really pleased to have added a workforce training component through our program partner, Association for Energy Affordability. This is a program we're partnering with NYSERDA and also in the process of exploring other funding sources to expand this throughout the county. The next slide, please. And finally, there's a lot of work underway by another Sustainable Westchester colleague on opportunities offered through solar plus storage. Michelle de la Fontaine of Sustainable Westchester is championing concepts including a virtual power plant comprised of a residential aggregation of PV plus storage, where the combined capacity of the batteries can be used as a resource by the utility. Another concept is combining community solar installations with peak demand reduction through storage in order to optimize economics. And so each of these programs draws on the resources and the lessons learned from the others. And they also all leverage the unique relationship that Sustainable Westchester has with its member municipalities to support accelerated acceptance and adoption of these technologies. And together, they're designed to maximize the clean energy opportunities for all sectors throughout the county. So
well, that's
happy to, yeah.
Well, that's
happy
very.
to talk about the service. That's the overview.
Yeah, this is like where the clean energy economy, where the rubber hits the road. So it's really exciting to see all of this innovation happening with Sustainable Westchester. And it just goes to show this kind of portfolio approach, how much it can actually deliver in terms of benefits to communities. So what is Westchester Power going to look like in, let's say, 5 years from now?
Well, I guess it'll look similar to today. Although it's funny whenever people ask me about the future, I like to think of a future where maybe Sustainable Westchester and the rest of us can be off doing other things because everything's sustainable and we succeeded. But we're not gonna be there in 5 years. We do, in sort of more concrete terms, we do expect at that point most of the municipalities will be in the aggregation, and we also expect that the sort of holy grail of bringing the community solar initiative more tightly integrated into the supply. We're going to be there once those billing challenges or billing obstacles and a couple other things are smoothed out. So we think we're going to be in a situation where we'll be able to accelerate the construction of renewables right here in Westchester County. That we think that's going to be economic because of that ability. We think that some of the more exciting business models and technologies that we're sort of flirting with, and we do have people contact us on a regular basis who are working on these cutting edge things, whether it be sort of electric vehicle transportation as a Uber style service with grid connect, et cetera, et cetera. It's all out there, and they're all sort of sorting themselves out. And when the right opportunities come along, we'll plug them into our programs as well. So I think there's going to be more of that as those prove out. And then, but regardless, as I say, although there is this fantasy future of mine where it's all part of our everyday life, I think there will still be a need for an organization which can be the repository for the expertise and the making those local connections, engaging folks at the local level in these developments. So I think we'll be here and we'll be continuing to push these along.
Great. Very exciting. So I want to bring Sam Morgan into the conversation. Now, Sam, just so that we all level set, and you represent Constellation, which is the ESCO supplier for Sustainable Westchester, correct?
That's correct, Brad.
All right, and you guys not only provide the power supply for the CCA, but you're also the source of all the renewable energy certificates, right?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Correct.
So, we're lucky to have you on the call because we don't often hear the perspective of the ESCO in the context of CCA. So, my first question to you is, how would you define success for CCA? And I guess what can we do as stakeholders, folks on this call, to try to ensure that success?
Yeah, it's a good question, Brad, and thanks to you and Pat and Todd for hosting the call. As Brad mentioned, my name is Sam Morgan, and I manage the government aggregation strategy for Constellation Energy, and as you mentioned, we're the supplier for the Westchester power aggregation that you just heard Dan and Nina tell us so much about. So I think in terms of, defining success or ensuring success, maybe start real quickly at a conceptual level and then offer a couple practical guidelines, at least from an ESCO perspective. So I think one thing for municipal leaders and stakeholders to recognize is that while the energy and aggregation space may not be something that they feel overly familiar with, you guys probably all have a great deal of experience running procurements and communicating and implementing policies, and those are probably actually core competencies that either you or folks on your staffs or in your governments have. So a lot of what we'll talk about here are concepts that'll probably sound pretty familiar. So one thing in terms of creating a successful CCA program is to define success yourself. So at either a municipal level, or if you're involved in a consortium such as Sustainable Westchester or similarly, define what you consider success. And then once you do that, I think you have to drive alignment between municipal stakeholders and communicate that message. So much of what the folks that started Sustainable Westchester had to do was, or rather Westchester Power Aggregation had to do was go out and really meet with stakeholders and drive alignment and communicate. So, an example of defining success might be to, eliminate or reduce volatility in residential supply rates, or incorporating some percentage of renewable energy, or doing some of both. But I think articulating those goals, clearly, and driving alignment, those are really important things to do. And then after you do that, I think you need to go out and kind of test your definition of success and make sure it's achievable. So go out and talk to stakeholders, test that what you are looking to try to do is possible, and if not, go back and modify the plan. So then, kind of getting down to a brass tacks, level. I think an early thing you need to decide, is what role as a municipality you want to play in supporting a CCA. So, and I know that we've got three great administrators on the line that'll be sharing some perspectives with you a little later, and we'll probably discuss some of this. But there's varying roles I think that municipalities can play, from de minimis to pretty heavily involved. So I think setting up that kind of internal milepost for how involved you want to be in what parts of the process is that's an important step. And then as mentioned, talk to not only stakeholders within your own municipality, but the folks on this phone are represent 3, 4, 5 different types of stakeholder perspectives. So CCA administrators, folks like Brad at NYSERDA, regulators, and other municipal officials. And I always encourage people, don't be afraid to talk to an ESCO such as Constellation. We share a different perspective on things as well. So talk to as many different folks that are involved in the CCA space as you can. I think those will all be informative to moving forward or not with a CCA. Secondly, set realistic goals and set expectations accordingly. I'm a big fan of shooting for singles and doubles. If you hit a home run, that's great. What I can tell you from being involved in CCAs for most of the last 20 years is that what you'll find is over time, if you have a reasonably successful CCA or aggregation, the constituents, primarily the residential customers or residents in your community will become more and more educated about energy policy and making energy decisions, and it will become much easier in year 3, year 4 of an aggregation to talk about some more sophisticated goals and aims of an aggregation. That's not to say don't come out of the gate shooting, but don't be discouraged if you can't get buy-in for everything you're trying to do on maybe the first go-round of the aggregation. I would look at aggregations more as a life cycle where you can evolve toward achieving a number of goals. But they're an incredible platform for community education. I think we probably overlook and understate that at times. So you will create a much more educated constituency simply by starting an aggregation. I'd say perfection is the enemy of progress, and I won't go too far into how to run a procurement because there's folks that do that specifically for a living. But what I'll say generally is, allow for the fact that you don't know everything, and neither does anybody else. So don't fall into what I'll call procurement paralysis. I always advise customers, if they're running their own, procurement, create a 2-step process. Process 1, if you're looking for an ESCO, once you've set your goals and nailed down what you're trying to accomplish, look to qualify ESCOs such as Constellation and others and make sure that they have the experience and financial stability to serve your aggregation, as well as allow them to answer any or ask any questions or seek clarifications on your RFP. And what you'll find is that there's usually something that you didn't think of or something that wasn't super clear. So building that time in to allow for some questions, I think, is very important. And then, round 2 is where, after clarifying anything that needs clarifying, nailing down any kind of major contractual issues, then at that point it's appropriate to look to drive ESCOs to provide their best and final price. So kind of a 2-step process around that, I think, makes sense. And then, a note about evaluating bids and ESCOs. This is something that, people will ask me sometimes, well, how do you achieve the lowest price? And what I caution is I would not shoot for the lowest price. I would aim to achieve the best deal at the lowest cost. So we have seen, not just in the aggregation space, but in other parts of the energy market, we have seen numerous times where ESCOs have come in and bid the lowest price and then and been 10% below everybody else. That's usually a sign that they're doing something wrong. If they are financially stable, that is a benefit to the consumers, but a number of suppliers we've seen, including in the CCA space, were not as financially stable as they are financially stable enough to support pricing deals that way, and that creates a situation where they have to come back and change their price, and then you have issues with your customers and your aggregation. So I do always caution, put however you want to do it, put some weighting on financial stability and experience of your supplier. So I think that's those are kind of my quick guidelines to ensuring successful CCA program, Brad.
Great. Well, thanks, Sam. I really appreciate it. And I guess I want to take this time to just say thank you to Nina and Dan and Sam for being part of this. I'm sure we'll have some questions later on, so please do stick around. I'm going to pass it now to Pat to introduce our next panel of CCA administrators.
Oh, thank you, Brad. Well, first up will be Javier Barrios. He's a founding member and managing partner of Good Energy LP, a national energy aggregator and consultant headquartered in New York City. Javier is a leader in the power and energy retail industry and represents several Fortune 1000 clients and large public sector and government institutions. For the last 17 years, his company has specialized in energy procurement, energy efficiency, and demand response, advising and consulting commercial and public sector clients across 21 states and Canada. Good Energy provides energy procurement consulting for more than 400 communities nationwide. Next, we'll have Louise Gava, MEGA's CCA project leader. Louise has firsthand experience with the benefits of aggregated energy supply and renewable energy programs from her work with the Village of Canton and St. Lawrence County, her North Country home for 12 years. Louise spent 8 years working in the higher education, sustainability, and energy arenas, with the last 2 years focused on new and exciting energy opportunities, including remote net metering, residential solar campaigns, and microgrids. She has experience educating and supporting municipalities, public and private educational institutions, and residents in decisions related to energy procurement and development. Welcome, Louise. And finally, we'll have Glenn Weinberg. He manages Joule Community Power, a Joule Assets business unit that partners with municipalities to develop innovative energy procurement models while advancing energy reduction, energy management, and clean energy goals amidst an evolving regulatory environment. He is responsible for spearheading comprehensive community choice aggregation programs across New York State and beyond. Glenn has also been instrumental in designing, implementing, and scaling New York State's first CCA program in Westchester County, working with nonprofit Sustainable Westchester on contract development, supplier relations, the procurement process, and community outreach. Welcome, all of you.
Great. So before we get to our panelists, let's just talk for a minute, about what is the role of the administrator. And first, I just want to make clear that the municipality, not the CCA administrator, is ultimately responsible for the CCA program. So that's important to keep in mind as we start to talk with the administrators. But generally, as far as the order that established CCA in New York State, the CCA administrator is the entity that facilitates the process of preparing and submitting a CCA implementation plan and data protection plan for the Public Service Commission PSC approval. The CCA administrator handles mostly all the procurement. They solicit bids from ESCOs for energy supply and other value-added clean energy products and services, and they're responsible for certain reporting and accountability measures. Essentially, the CCA administrator is who you work with to establish CCA in your community. A local government can serve the role of CCA administrator, but administering a CCA really requires extensive knowledge and expertise in energy markets, contracts, and policy. There's a lot that goes into it, and that's why many communities will look to our guests to serve this role. So all three have had CCA implementation plans that have been approved by the Public Service Commission. We're lucky to have all three administrators on the call with us today. So in no particular order, we'll start with Good Energy, then Mega, then Joule Assets. So Javier from Good Energy, are you there?
Oh.
Javier?
Oh, dear. Maybe we'll go over to Louise and we'll see if there's a problem with Javier.
Oh, I'm here. Hello?
Oh, great. There we are. So, great. So why don't you, Javier, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Good Energy, its history, and core mission.
Sure. Thanks, Brad. Thanks everyone for being on the webinar. Thanks for inviting me. Really appreciate being here and hearing all the feedback from all the panelists. One thing I would say is that in working in so many different states with regard to CCA, it's so important for regulators, regulatory agencies, and efficiency agencies to be in support of this program. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts as we've heard today. So it's exciting that I get to work this in our home state. Obviously, we're based in New York City. So it's really important for the success of on the short term and also for the long term success of the program. So it's really nice, refreshing to hear that in your home state that there's a ton of support from all stakeholders and really working with the Public Service Commission and NYSERDA has been a real pleasure, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate with all agencies and even associations that are getting involved in CCA and local organizers. So thank you again. I just wanted to make that statement. Good Energy has been around for now, I guess now close to 18 years. We started in New York State and basically focused on commodity procurement, natural gas, electricity. And many don't know, but half of our business is also a lighting business. We started an e-commerce site 18 years ago called goodmart.com, which is our sister company that sells over 50,000 lighting products, energy efficiency sensors, controls throughout the state of New York and the tri-state area. So not only are we looking, and part of our mission is to find savings on the commodity procurement, natural gas contracts and electricity contracts for commercial establishments, whether it be hospitality, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be a different set of verticals. But also we look to implement energy efficiency measures, lighting retrofits, lighting design retrofits, and with the new LED advancements, we're obviously very involved in making sure that we implement a lot of things, a lot of initiatives within New York. In fact, we're on the board of Legication, the LED education, and recently we won two contracts, one with NYPA, where we provide the LED and energy efficiency measures for a $17.5 million contract throughout the state. And also recently were awarded an OGS, Office for General Services contract, a 5-year term that also provides energy efficiency products and LED products for state-run organizations, and we're very proud of that award. So, not only are we looking to provide renewable energy through the form of renewable energy certificates and the new innovative microgrid projects that are being pushed by REV, reforming the energy vision, but we also, are a nuts and bolts company who goes in and really retrofits office space buildings and performs build outs. So that's one side of our business. Obviously, we were involved with the public sector side of the business probably in the mid-2000s, where we got involved in many of the municipal aggregations that we do now, especially in the Midwest and Illinois. And that's really where we got our feet wet with CCA. We were involved heavily in the Midwest. We actually have offices here headquartered in New York, but we also have offices in the greater St. Louis and Peoria area where we do a lot of business, where we have over 200 active municipal CCA programs that we're currently running. And, it's interesting, the different perspectives that you have working from different states, because actually in Illinois, it's not as simple as here where you just pass a local law, and not to say that that's simple, but, there's a quite a bit, an easier process or more efficient process in New York relative to other states. In Illinois, you actually had to put a ballot question on a primary or a general election and wait some time for it to be voted on and then approved with the Secretary of State and move forward with an actual CCA program. So there was a lot more involvement on the side of the CCA administrator or consultant in those states, where you actually are campaigning and promoting the program within the constituency of the municipality. So, and also in Massachusetts, where we have about 50 plus communities doing CCA, and there's also like a 6-month process where it is proposed at a public town hall meetings, and it's an egregious process, not as simple as simply passing a resolution or an ordinance at the local level. So obviously we're bringing in best practices from Good Energy to New York State. Our implementation plan has been approved by the Public Service Commission, so municipalities can fall under that umbrella. The one thing I'd like to compare with other states is that in some cases, for example, in Illinois, you have to have a plan of operation and governance, which is like an implementation plan that every single municipality has to produce. In New York, it's quite different and a little bit simpler, and kudos to Ted Kelly and the TPS staff and the Public Service Commission to see the value and the efficiency of the process. But there's actually a kind of an umbrella process where you fall, if you choose any of the CCA administrators, you fall under their implementation plan, and there is no newly created implementation plan. You just basically use the implementation plan of the CCA administrator, making it extremely efficient for you guys to move forward, for a municipality to move forward, which is very nice. Makes the process a lot easier, and obviously just dealing with all the different types of state rules, administrative ruling that we go through, it's quite refreshing to deal with that type of process. One of the things I wanted to talk about with regard to what a CCA administrator does on our side is obviously, we heard from the different local organizers, Sustainable Westchester, but what do we do as a CCA administrator? What's the specific role with regard to the other stakeholders like an ESCO? For example, a CCA administrator will run an RFP for a municipality. We'll actually run it. We'll write it. Good Energy has written hundreds of CCA RFPs, so that's something that you can run. And this is to actually gather pricing from ESCOs. So we run a formal RFP, which every municipality in the state would have to run, being that it's a commodity contract. So that's something we do. On Good Energy's part, we actually also run an outreach program. There's a mandatory 2-month outreach program that municipalities have to run through their local organizers or through their publications, their media. That's something that Good Energy does for you. I know that Sustainable Westchester and Dan Welsh was talking about some of the issues, some of the problems you might be having, and mind you, obviously they were doing it at a very early stage, and we're pioneers at doing this, so there was a lot of learning curves that they were trying to get over. But what we do is basically insulate and resolve those issues for municipalities. So we try to be that outsourced party that provides the staffing that helps you with some of the costs, and we pay for a lot of that outreach, and we pay for a lot of the communications. We set up the public meetings. We go to your public hearings. So we're there hand-holding the municipality throughout the process of the CCA. We have our own call center, so not only do we provide support prior to the CCA being implemented, but we obviously provide support post-CCA implementation with any customer service issues that you guys may have or any municipality may have. So that's really critical because as a public official, you're going to get calls from your neighbors. You're going to get calls from your friends asking you what this is all about. This is all so new to us. What is it going to do? How does it affect me? And the day-to-day dealings of a CCA are what municipal officials deal with. So we try to insulate you, the municipality. We try to provide that support system for municipal officials because they're the face of the municipality. Everybody knows them. Many of them, especially smaller cities, give out their cell phones to their neighbors, and so they have a direct line to a mayor or a city clerk or a village clerk or a town clerk. So it's important for us, and it's just really from experience that that we make sure that we're there for that municipality.
Great. So Javier, let me just we've got about 2 more minutes for you, but if I could just quickly ask, what is Good Energy's approach to clean energy options?
So obviously we are excited about all the new technologies and REV and very involved with what's going on with community solar, and we have about 3 communities that we're working on a community solar project through our CCAs within the various counties. There's also a hydro, a low-impact hydro plant that we're trying to work through, a potential CCA that we have in Western New York. So, when it comes to CCA and renewable energy, we really want to partner with the municipality and really understand what their sustainability goals are. In many cases, we worked with NYSERDA, with the Clean Energy Communities Program. So every time we go into presenting a CCA, we want to show the environmental benefits and how we can marry those two, obviously, through either CDG credits, through some type of off-taker scenario where the CCA actually takes from let's say, a unit contingent deal from a particular renewable source. That's the way we implement it. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are in line with the sustainability goals of that particular municipality. So we provide a questionnaire on what those sustainability goals are, and then we move from there. And then whatever local organizer, whatever committee needs to get involved, we then push forward. In many cases, some communities, if it's a rural community, might not have a sustainability agenda. When it's larger communities or communities that are very forward-thinking when it comes to sustainability, then obviously we will provide the options and the partnerships involved. But as a company, we've always been a green thinking company, and in fact, in the Midwest and in Massachusetts, about 64% of our communities have gone 100% renewable through a simple renewable energy certificate. So if you were to tally up the total of that, that's about 1.4 billion kilowatt hours, which equates to about 1.1 million metric tons of greenhouse gas offsets. And we were talking about what that means as far as, passenger vehicles, taking off the road. That's about 226,000 vehicles that we're taking off a road through our combined municipal aggregations, and about 158,000 homes not using electricity for 1 year. So a renewable energy certificate, I know there's these arguments about what's the validity of it. I think it's a great tool, complemented with physical projects on the grid and micro projects on the grid. But CCA, as I think Brad had stated, this is an extremely powerful tool to offset the global issue that we have, which is, these greenhouse gas emissions that really are hurting the environment. So, we've worked also with the EPA on federal programs, the Green Power Communities program, where we've actually designated many of our communities as green power communities. They have a designated federal program which people can get involved with, which we're excited. We worked with the EPA on that. So we definitely feel that CCA is a very easy vehicle for people to achieve, 100% offsets through a renewable energy certificate, and also it can be the catalyst to bringing all these new technologies that are coming down the pike, and all these new systems. And New York State is one of the leaders in talking about innovation and what these, whether it be battery storage, whether it be community solar, whether it be demand response and curtailment, is really being a leader throughout the state and making sure that CCA implements these technology projects, these renewable technology projects.
Great.
Well, I know that was more than 2 minutes, but
yeah.
Sorry.
We really appreciate you joining the call today, Javier from Good Energy. Thank you very much. Now, Louise, are you there?
I sure am.
Great.
Brad?
Yes.
Just a point of information. This is Pat. We have over a dozen good questions, and I'm thinking of some strategies for how we can get them all answered if we run out of time. But just wanted you to know.
Okay, great. So, Louise, thank you for joining. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about MEGA, its history, and core mission?
Of course. So I'm Louise Gava. I am MEGA's CCA project leader. And MEGA stands for the Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance. And MEGA came to be in the late 90s in New York State when New York State began deregulating. So this was the moment in our history that has allowed programs like CCA to become a possibility when we actually were able to separate the supply and procure it from someone other than the utility. So Tompkins County and Tioga County worked together in the late 90s. They're in a NYSEG utility territory. And in that moment in time, they went out and said, let's see what happens if we procure our electricity from someone other than NYSEG. That pilot of deregulation was such a success that more and more counties wanted to join into that group purchasing effort, and as such, a formal structure was required. So 17 years later, MEGA still exists. We formally began in 2001 as too many counties wanted to work together on this great procurement. And MEGA is now an established, not-for-profit local development corporation that serves the energy procurement needs of 35 of New York's 62 counties, hundreds of other municipalities, nonprofits, school districts, and businesses across New York. So our work as MEGA includes procurement of basic energy supplies, so electric and gas, as well as hydro, solar, and demand response services. So CCA is a very logical extension of our nearly 2-decade-long work with municipalities. As I learned when I joined MEGA in 2015 and began to develop our CCA program, many of our municipal participants, the municipal officials that have been with us for a decade plus, have been asking for a CCA-like program for many years because they themselves have experienced the benefits of an aggregation program like MEGA has, and they were asking for a way to extend those benefits to their residents. So this is sort of a no-brainer for many municipal officials out there. So MEGA brings our nearly 2 decades of experience with our aggregated energy purchasing in New York. We only work in New York. And our commitment to transparent operations and strict compliance with New York state laws to our work with CCA. So that's who we are and what we do and why we're doing CCA.
Great. And is there anything else that communities need to know about MEGA's approach to CCA?
Sure, yeah, I have a slide here. One of the things, Brad, I know that municipal officials are always curious about is what is this level of effort? And, you know, staff time is limited and finances are limited. So how much do they have to really commit to making these great benefits happen? And I will say that one of MEGA's value propositions from the beginning has been creating simple and efficient processes for energy purchasing. And that holds true for CCA as well. So just to help folks to provide a little more context to our structure and how we know that we're doing that, is that MEGA is actually run by a board of directors who are current municipal officials or staff of municipalities. And so it's with their guidance that we've designed the structure of our CCA program and make sure that it really fits with what municipalities need and that it's not too much effort and that it requires no financial expenditure on their part. So from MEGA's side, we manage the CCA development. We were the first CCA administrator to have an approved implementation plan under the order in New York State last October. We do all of the education within the municipality, and we are the primary, we have primary responsibility for the implementation of the program and the long-term management of the program. So again, we have designed our program in a way so that it creates the ease of regulatory compliance for the municipality, because as Brad mentioned, at the end of the day, the state has assigned that responsibility for compliance to the municipality, but we do as much of that and make it as easy as possible for the municipality as we can. But then we've still created a way in our process to allow each program to really be tailored to each municipality's goals and needs. So our municipal officials, much like Javier was saying, are really involved at the level they desire. That being said, we do require certain things of our municipal officials, but it's what you would expect. Again, we need help identifying what are the values of CCA that are important for each municipality. We do not have a policy of going in and telling a municipality what those values are. We definitely go to the table and ask what they are, listen, and respond in kind. So an example would be the details and the values around the incorporation of renewable energy. The second most important thing that we ask for from our municipalities is their support in doing the educational efforts. So this doesn't mean that they're up there presenting, but it means that they help us understand the best ways to reach their constituents, and that there is a familiar face of one of those municipal officials at each physical outreach session. They are, at the end of the day, the municipality's constituents, and while they will be working with MEGA, it's also important that that connection remains and retained. So if the way MEGA makes this simple is, and this is actually identified in the order and sort of identified by the state, is that we find one point person at the municipality that's the primary liaison. So we're going back and forth just with that one person, so it makes it easier. So the screen is showing the distillation of many steps that have to happen to make CCA possible in New York State. It's much more seamless than this. This is just the reality. It's not necessarily what the resident feels or what the municipality feels, but this is what it has to. This is what it takes. And I will note that those first three steps really require, in MEGA's model, the most municipal involvement. And the way MEGA has structured this is we ask municipalities to commit to work with MEGA on CCA before we begin dedicating resources to educating residents within the municipality. The commitment to work with MEGA, we call it, a handshake agreement, is not a commitment to implement CCA. So as Brad was saying earlier, there are many places where a municipality can walk away if it turns out that constituents are not very supportive of this idea, and that does happen in communities. They don't see this as the choice that it is. So we appreciate that and we allow for that. And I can tell you that having that first step be that commitment has been comfortable for many of our many municipalities, and one of those reasons is many of the municipalities in New York State have already a decade or so of a relationship with MEGA. And again, I was mentioning earlier that they say, oh, right, well, we've had the benefits from working with you as a municipality, so of course, we would like to extend that to our residents. The main point of that handshake agreement is to identify and outline the responsibilities of each party. Again, I've talked through that at a high level today, but it clarifies those roles, which is very important. And then once that agreement is signed, that's when MEGA begins doing the education. I will note that it is really important to us that the education happens before the local law gets passed. I believe I've been a big participant in my own communities, always in the governmental process, and it's really frustrating when you show up at a public hearing and you know nothing about what's being talked about, and you've had to do a ton of research beforehand. Who has the time to do that, right? We want to make it easy for municipal constituents to be informed, engaged in the process in an educated way. So that's what we do. We do the education before the passage of the local law. It also gives the municipality the opportunity, if their constituents come to be educated and it doesn't seem like it's a good fit for the municipality or certain goals need to be adjusted, it gives that opportunity before you get too far down the process. Obviously, passing a local law does not commit you to CCA, but it is a more formal step. So the other thing I just want to say is that point of formal commitment for CCA in this MEGA model here isn't until step 5, and that's when the municipality is actually presented with the results from the bidding process, and they're provided a recommendation for which option or options to offer their residents. So this sort of shows you, again, it's those first 3 steps. They're minimal engagement in those first 3 steps, but it is very much a partnership. So that's what I want municipal officials to know, and energy activists out there that are listening to know about MEGA and our approach to CCA.
Great. And then, Louise, just real quick, what is MEGA's approach to clean energy options?
Yeah, it's the least quick one, Brad, but I'll be quick, knowing that we've got time and Glenn's still waiting in the wings there. So again, I think the understanding, I can't stress this enough, of a municipality's roles relating to renewable energy is extremely important. You do not all have the same goals. And so when I try to assess and understand what we're all working towards, the two first metrics I use are trying to understand and consider scale and timeline. And so when I talk about scale, I'm referring to the need to make sure that we have enough renewable supply to match the demand for the goals of the community. And depending on the goals of the community, that's not always possible immediately. So again, we were talking about community solar. It's not necessarily something that we automatically already have enough of to plug in to a CCA depending on the size, right? So that's one piece, and that's where the time scale comes in, because we might need to consider how our goals and working towards our goals fit with a timeline that we might actually be changing and creating a market, because many of these CCAs are actually big enough to spur renewable development. But as we all know, that development with all of its regulatory and financing processes takes time. So our municipalities that we work with really have to decide, and it's really wonderful to help them, provide advice down this path if they're willing to, take a step and it be partway towards their CCA goals and clean energy goals, and we're going to build over time, or if they feel like they can't start until we are able to achieve all their goals at once. So that's a key frame. And then beyond the scale and the timeline, there are various opportunities for integration of renewables depending on where municipalities are located in the state and how they value the relative geographic location of that renewable energy compared to their end user. So does it have to be next door? Do my residents have to drive by it for it to have value? And I think there's a lot of questions we ask about location. There's a lot of questions we ask about source. So I know a number of communities that have some very good reasons for not wanting a particular source because they have had some bad experience with, I'm not going to name an industry, but a particular type of renewable development in their community, and so they absolutely don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. That doesn't mean they can't have renewable energy in their CCA. And then, of course, it's important to understand what a municipality feels about economic development in their community, and so they may desire it to be a new asset versus something that's existing. All of these things go into sort of what is the solution for that community or that aggregation. The last thing I want to say, my sort of key take home looking at this is, again, I said it once, but CCAs, we've all been talking about how great CCAs are, and they really have this ability to create the market for renewable energy and move us forward. And I see this very clearly in the analogy I use all the time, and I apologize for those of you that have heard it before, but I owned and operated a community agriculture, supported agriculture farm, and was the president of an agricultural cooperative a few years ago. And within the 10 years that have passed since I started doing that and now, the ability to offer local products that are produced in an ecologically sensitive way at the same price as an imported product has become a reality. We couldn't have every checkbox and everything we desired 10 years ago. And now in the community that I live, where we've been working on these things, we can. So it took us time to get there, but I see that municipal governments and residents were critical in that local food transition by creating the demand, piloting unique models, and otherwise supporting the transition. And I would say that no one has a crystal ball, but I would say I feel that we are standing in that same place with renewable energy right now. So if renewable energy is incorporating it is one of the goals of a municipality, then I personally am excited to help engage in that transformation.
Great, Louise. I really appreciate you being on the phone. Thank you. Glenn, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Same question to you. Tell us a little bit about Joule Assets and your history and core mission. Just tell us what we need to know about CCA and your approach.
So Joule Assets was founded in 2010, and our mission as a private business really dovetails nicely with that of Sustainable Westchester as a nonprofit, and that's really no coincidence. Our CEO, Mike Gordon, is the founding chair of Sustainable Westchester. You heard Dan mention him earlier. Really a tremendous amount of volunteer work and leadership from Mike to get the Westchester Power Program up and running. I joined that effort first as a volunteer and later as an employee of Sustainable Westchester as the first program director of the Westchester Power Program. And so it's great to hear that process and the learnings and the challenges and all that, the story of that being retold now, and to be able to couple that with some real success and some new exciting initiatives to further evolve and develop the program. And I'd be remiss before I go any further. Thanks to NYSERDA and to Brad and to Pat and to Todd and his office for putting this together and telling that story and for having me on as well. But Joule's mission really is to leverage collective community scale action to access clean energy and energy efficiency markets for all consumers, especially smaller consumers, residential and small commercial consumers that have been previously excluded from a lot of the energy markets and the opportunities to both save and earn from them. So we bring those groups of those large consumers into those markets through community scale buying and selling, and innovating products and services to offer opportunities, again, previously only available to larger customers like large commercial customers, industrial customers, hospitals, et cetera. And our goal really is to offer comprehensive consulting services for municipalities to help communities. As Javier and Louise mentioned, we as CCA administrators, we work for the community. We work for the municipality. You hire us to help you meet your goals. And in some cases, you have some very aggressive goals and are looking for tools to get there. And in other cases, you haven't yet set those goals because even the goal setting process, that planning process, is quite labor intensive and requires a lot of expertise and resources, and are not always available at the community level. So we help and we support in that. And our goal really is to meet the state's goals and many of the community's goals, which are in concert with that, and even sometimes even more aggressive than the state's goals, to get to as close to 100% New York State clean energy as possible, as quickly as possible. And so the sourcing of renewables, I'm preempting your question, Brad, and I know that we're under the gun in time. That really is our core focus. So as Javier mentioned, in New York State, the communities really fall under the implementation plan of the CCA administrator. And as Brad mentioned, there are 3 now approved implementation plans. You've now heard from all 3 of those administrators. So I really urge you, and I know we're not going to cover everything on this call, so I really urge you to go look at those implementation plans and really put them up next to each other and compare what the administrators are proposing to do with you and for you as communities. It is our core focus really to source clean energy and more than that, to source local clean energy for communities in a way that saves folks money and actually allows them to earn from markets as well. And as Louise mentioned, this is a long process, right? It doesn't happen overnight. And we've been developing this model that we are now rolling out for the better part of 2 years. And that's a lot of developing relationships and speaking with suppliers, with project developers, with existing, with renewable asset owners, and iteratively going back to folks like Ted and Brad at DPS and NYSERDA respectively to bounce things off of them and sharpening this model. And what we found is that in these new emerging local clean energy markets, Brad spoke earlier about community solar. There's some community hydro as well coming into the portfolio on the state level. Really what we found is that these project developers, largely solar developers, it's very expensive for them to acquire customers. It's a sales challenge, and that is primarily the largest obstacle that has prevented more of these projects from being built. There are many hundreds in the interconnection queue, but only a small handful that have actually been built. And customer acquisition is really one of the major challenges. And there are marketing companies and other firms out there in the market that provide those services for the developers to acquire customers for them. CCA is a conduit to actually allow the community to play, in many respects, that customer acquisition role. And there's money in it for entities that achieve that customer acquisition, and so why shouldn't the communities be paid a market wage essentially for organizing and doing outreach and education around community solar and actually bringing customers to the table? So that's precisely what we've proposed, is that municipalities, communities share in those available funds and use it as a community reinvestment fund to actually spark new clean energy programs, energy efficiency programs and technologies, and really anything that advances the community's sustainability goals that we will help you achieve and craft. Our implementation plan, which really focuses quite strongly on this local clean energy component, was approved in March, and it's now a really exciting time for us. We're now finalized a CDG implementation plan, which Brad mentioned, which is a real detailed process-oriented document that shows precisely how we're going to do this. And we have several other sort of exciting developments to announce in the coming weeks and months. And I know we're running up here, and there's plenty more that I'd like to say precisely about those programs that we're offering, and the demand management programs that we're offering as well, that speaks to the efficiency, system peak, and building efficiency that have been mentioned on this call. But I want to make sure that before we run out of time officially, that I mention that really the core of our model, and this really comes from our learnings in the Sustainable Westchester Power Program, is the critical importance of a local presence and a local operation that supports communities and supports consumers in doing education and outreach around these programs. So we've developed a local organizer model, which is really a partnership model. We split all the administrative fees 50-50, and I think several of our local partners are on this call right now. And really it is the local partner's job to be that local arm, and to support you guys as municipal officials and community leaders to spread the word and to support consumers in the CCA program. And I'd like to introduce one of our local partners here, Jeff Demansky, who's our partner in the Hudson Valley. And maybe he can just take a couple minutes just to talk a little bit about the outreach efforts they've been doing and the interface with municipal officials and community leaders, et cetera. Jeff, are you on the call?
I am here, and I know we only have a very brief amount of time, but thank you for the introduction, Glenn. And I just will say, just very briefly, that we're excited to be part of this program, specifically because of what Glenn said and what Brad highlighted and what Nina and Dan were both talking about in terms of what CCA can be as a springboard. And so my organization is a not-for-profit, and we're led by municipal membership organizations like the National League of Cities and the National Association of Counties, and we're charged with being that interface, that partner for a community, to help them take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. So our major mission is to help focus on communities understanding for the duration of the program what CCA is and what it can do, including all those really exciting elements that Dan and Nina and Brad mentioned. So we're looking forward to what the coming years bring as we roll out the program. And I'm going to, for sake of time, going to stop right there and say thanks so much.
Well, thank you guys very much. And I think each of the administrators got approximately equal time. So now I'll just hand it over to Pat, and I guess we'll decide how we're going to handle the questions in the very short period of time we have left. Pat?
Yeah, we have some terrific questions. What I recommend is that Melissa and I distribute the questions. We've been, keeping careful notes as to who they go to. We'll distribute them to the speakers, and then we'll include the responses with the slides and the bios when we send them out.
That sounds like a great idea. Pat, I can't thank you enough for putting this together, and Melissa and Todd and everyone on the team who made this webinar possible. You're doing such great work, and we just want to acknowledge and thank you. Really, to everybody who participated today, if you have any questions, if you want to talk to me directly or your Clean Energy Community Coordinator, reach out to one of the CCA administrators or even Sustainable Westchester. The reason why we put this together today is because, again, we're all on this journey together. So thank you very much, and I'll just hand it over to Pat if she has any final comments.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brad. Just to recap, you can reach me if you have any follow-up questions or final questions. You can email them to pat@courtneystrong.com, and we will be sending out the slides. Now, normally we try to turn them around right away, but, to make sure these questions get answered, just give us a few days here. And then we'll send them out, and we'll look for you on our next webinar. Thank you all so much.